Nun Beis Summit Beis. We'll begin Nun Beis Summit Aleph, the first wide line of the two dots. Beis Shammai Yomim. So continue on with the difference in the Suda, the differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Rabbanan Beis Shammai Yomim Neitel Yadayim V'achar Kach Moiskim Masechet. Beis Shammai says first you wash hands, then you pour the cup, you make kiddush, you wash first. Now over here, this machlokes revolves around the dinim, the different dinim of Tumah, and how we have to be noig. In the time of the Tanoim, they were careful, and there were many gzeras and takonas to distance a person from Tumah so that Kohanim don't come to eat Truma b'Tumah. And so it was common to eat Truma. One had to maintain a state of Tahara, and they made many gzeras. One of them is the din of Netilas Yadayim. Midrabanan, hands have a din of Sheni Latuma. In Torah, there's no such thing as Tumah on hands and not on the body, but Midrabanan, they gave the din of Tumah on hands a Sheni Latuma. Now, in Torah, in Chulin, a food cannot become Tomei, or liquids cannot become Tomei if they're Chulin from a Sheni. The Rabbanan were geyser, hands have a din of a Sheni. A Sheni can make a liquid into a Rishon, and that in turn can be Matama foods. So part and parcel of the din of Netilas Yadayim, a fundamental part and reason of it is Harchaka from Tumah. And there's different chumras midrabanan between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel underlying this machlokes. So let's go through it and we'll see. So Beis Shammai says, first you wash, because prior to washing, hands have a din of a sheni latuma. They're considered sheni, letome have a din of a sheni. So now you have to wash first, according to Beis Shammai, to remove the tuma from your hands. Because if you're going to say pour the cup first, we're afraid some of the wine might spill over. His hands, if he hasn't washed yet, they have a din of sheni. That liquid will become now tomei midrabanan or rishon latuma v'yachsim yitamas hakais. And midrabanan, they will mitama the outside of the kais. Now, the kais min Torah cannot become tomei. This is a tuma derabanan to begin with, but in any event, min Torah, a kais can only become tomei from an av atuma. It cannot become tomei from something less than an av atuma. It can become a tamei from a rishon, even if it would be a rishon deraisa. Certainly not this case where it's a rishon derabanan. But the rabbanan were geyser that the kli can become tamei. Al kaponim, the outside of the kli can become tamei from a rishon. So Beis Shammai holds that you first have to wash first to make sure your hands are not tamei, because if the hands were tamei, some of the wine might spill over. And if the hands were tomei, they would make the wine tomei, and that wine would be matame the outside of the kais. And in those days, they had to eat everything but tahara because of truma, and you weren't allowed to have a kais which was tomei. So that's why they say wash first. Frag the Gemara, well, if that's the concern of litma yadayim lekais, well, why the hands? Why are you afraid that it might spill over and it might make the liquid tomei and the liquid kais? If that's the case, his hands are tomei. Why won't they make the outside of the kais or the cup tomei in any event? No, the Gemara answers Yadayim Shni is saying this tumah derabanan that we put on hands prior to washing, the Rabbanan only gave it a level of sheni latuma. Vein sheni ois a shlishi b'chulin, and a sheni cannot in chulin make a shlishi. It's only through the medium of the liquid, which now the liquid midrabanan becomes a sheni, that it becomes a rishon rather, that it can be matama the kais. So that's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel, they say you first you're Masechet the kais, then you wash. Because if you're going to say that you wash first, then we're afraid perhaps he won't dry his hands properly. If he washed it, it's still wet, and we're afraid, yes, he's washed, yes, now his hands are tar and the water is tar, but if the outside of the kais happens to be tame, he happened to be using a tame kais, then if his hands aren't dried properly, the water on his hands will become tame from the kais, and make his hands tame and negate the whole netil siyadayim they just did. So again, the Gemara asks a similar kasha in nitma kais liyadayim. Well, even without this concern that he won't dry his hands properly, why don't we say if the kais might be tame, is tame, why won't it be matam his hands in any event? No, ein kli matama adam. A kli, even in the Rabbanon, a kli is not matame adam. A person can only become tome through an avatuma. So the kli, which is not an avatuma, cannot be matama adam, and even midrabban, it's only through the medium of a liquid. If you're telling me we're concerned that he's using a kais which is tome, well, why aren't we concerned that why isn't the kais going to be matama, the liquid inside anyway? And he can't be drinking wine which is tome if you were concerned if a person has to be shomer himself from not eating truma betuma, he has to be tor. Well, how can he have a kais which is tome? Even without this concern and this chashash, why won't the kais be matama, the liquid inside? More answer is we're only talking about a kli where we're only concerned in a more common case. It's not so common for a person to use a kli which is tome, and he would not be allowed to use a kli which is tome in any event, midrabanan. What we're concerned over here is if he uses a kli that became tome from the outside. Now, we're talking minatayra if a kli that's not a kli cheres, if it's a silver kais, a becher. If it became tome from the outside, the whole kli is tome. But here we're talking about a tumah derabbanan. The Rabbanan wanted to make it clear that this is a tumah derabbanan, so the person doesn't burn truma and kacha. So we're talking in a case where the outside of the kli became tome with liquids, which is only tome midrabbanan. And the Rabbanan made a demarcation that this is different than a tumah deraisa. So over here, only the outside is tome, the inside is tar. So the wine inside the kli will not become tome, because the inside is tar midrabbanan. It's only the outside that they gave it a din of tumah. The inside remains tar of the gabay tummy. It's only the outside that's tummy. It's not kli that the outside of it became tummy with a liquid, which is only a tumah derabbanan. The Rabbanan gave the outside of it, then but the inside of it, v'ugna, and the rim, v'ozna, and the ear, v'yadav, and the handle, tahar. But if the inside became tom, then they said the whole thing is tom. So that's the machlokes over here. Well, there are concerns either which way. What's the underlying this machlokes? Beis Shammai, the more answer, Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to use a kli that the outside is tame. Beis Hill's whole chashash is the kli, that you might use a kli which the outside is tame, and if his hands are washed first, they might not be dried properly, and the outside of the kli will matama the water in his hands, it'll matama his hands, therefore it'll be matama his hands again. He says you're not allowed to use a kli which the outside is tame, because we're afraid some of the wine might spill, the liquid might spill. And that liquid, if you're using a kli which the outside is tame, that liquid will become tame, and that will be tama's hands. And therefore, we're not concerned about the liquid spilling over and being matama's hands, because you're not allowed to use a kais which the outside is tame. So this whole concern of the Beis Hillel is not a concern, because you can't use a kli. They hold that you're not allowed to use a kli where the outside is tame, because there might be some of the liquid spilling over. If you use a kli which the outside is tame, that liquid will become tame in Mitama's hands. And so, therefore, you can't use a liquid, a kais where the outside is tame. And therefore, we're not concerned For Beis Hillel is concerned that if he uses a kli which is tomei, if he washes first, his hands might not be completely dry, and the liquid on his hands become tomei machmas a kais. You can't use a kais which the outside is tomei. Beis Hillel savrei mutar l'shtamish b'kli shenitmach b'mashkin, and Beis Hillel says no, you are allowed to use a kli where the outside is tomei, and therefore if you wash first, we're afraid it won't be dried properly, and it will become tomei from the outside of kais. And Amrin it says you Beis Shammai said that you can't use a kli which the outside is tomei because of nitzaitzes, because some of the liquid might spill over and become tomei from the kli and be matam your hands. We're not so concerned. It's not so common for nitzaitzes for it to spill over. And therefore, since you are allowed to use a kais which the outside is tomei, you should not wash first, because if you do, your hands might not be completely dry. And since you're allowed to use a kais where the outside is tomei, it might be matame. It'll be matame the liquid on your hands, and then be matame your hands. A different reason. Take a little yadayim suda. Another reason why we say you make kais first and then wash. Don't wash earlier, because the washing has to be immediately prior to the Suda. Now here you're making a hefsek, you're interrupting it. According to Beis Shammai, you're first washing, then you make Kiddush, and then you have the Suda. Beis Hillel says not appropriate, the washing should be immediately before the Suda. My davar acher, what's the reason for this additional reason? Hachi kamru Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Even according to you, where you say you cannot use a kli which is tomei on the outside because of nitzaitzes, because some of the liquid might spill in and make it tomei and Tomei's hands. So you're not concerned with what we are concerned with. Afilu hachi, nevertheless, you should still say that it's first kais and then until yadayim. Ha'adifa t'teichim until yadayim suda, because until yadayim should be immediately prior to the suda. The next machlokes in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai mekaneach. So Beis Shammai says that you dry your hands after washing. Dry your hands, and you put the napkin on the table. You put it dafka on the table. If you say you put it on the cushion, the keses, the cushion, could be tomei. If you put the napkin, it's wet, on the cushion, we're afraid it might be wet enough so that it comes into contact, the liquid comes into contact with the cushion, and that'll make his hands tomei and then negate the whole washing. Well, if that's a concern, why are you saying it's not a concern that make the water and the water the hand? Why aren't we afraid that nitme keses lamapa, that the keses will make the napkin directly, even without the intermediary water, it'll make it tomei? Where it says no, ein kli matame kli. Even midrabanan, a kli which is tomei cannot be matame another kli, even midrabanan. A kli is mekabel tuma from an avatuma. Even midrabanan is not tomei; it's only through the medium of a liquid. Again, why you're concerned about the water, etc. If the cushion that he's sitting on is tomei, why are we concerned that will be matama the person directly? No, same halacha. Ein kli matama adam. Even midrabanan, a kli cannot be matama an adam. An adam is mekabel tuma, not from a tuma that's not less than an avatuma. It cannot become tomei from something that is a rishon or below. Beis Hillel says no, rather put it on the cushion, not on the table. Because if you say put it on the shulchan, we're afraid if you put the napkin which is wet on the table, we're afraid that the liquid will become tomei, because the table might be tomei. The table which is tomei, it will be matame the liquid, and then food might come into contact with that wet liquid, and the food will become tomei, so the person will be eating food which is tomei. Well, if you're concerned that the table is tomei, why are we afraid that the table will be matame, the food that's on the table become tomei anyway? More answers. We're not talking about a shulchan that is more than a higher tumah b'sheni. It's a sheni, vein sheni oisa shlishi b'chulin eliyadei mashke, and therefore even by a chulin, by chulin, a sheni does not make a shlishi only through the medium of a mashke. So it's only concerned if you put the wet napkin on the table. But my kamiflagi, what's underlying machlekes Beis Shammai savar also lishtamish b'shulchan sheni. Beis Shammai says this is not a concern. Beis Hillel's concern is not a concern because you're not allowed to use a table, which is a sheni, truma, because we're afraid for the kahanim with the truma, if they use a table sheni, they'll have a table which is sheni, and it'll make the food a shlishi, and they cannot eat a food which is a shlishi, so we're afraid. So therefore, it's not a concern because you're not allowed to use a table which is a sheni on account of the oichle truma, the kahanim or chaverim Yisrael who eat their chulin be-kedushas with the maila of the altaris truma. Therefore, you're not allowed to use such a table, so the concern of Beis Hill is not a concern of Beis Hill. He says, no, you are allowed to. Because the ones who are oichle truma, the kahanim, or the ones who eat altaris truma, they're careful, and they will not use this. But so others are allowed to use this table. Secondly, they say, minat Torah, there's no such thing as netils yadayim. Minat Torah, either the person's tummy, he's completely tummy, his whole body, and he needs to be tovel in a mikveh. If he's not tummy, there's no such thing as only the hands are tummy, and that washing your hands takes off a tumah. This is there's no source for this type of tumah and tahar minat Torah. The whole source of this is the Rabbanan. My davar acher, achi kamer lebeis Hillel Beis Shammai. V'chitimru ma'ishna gabi oichlin dechashinan. If you're going to ask on me, Beis Hillel says, well, why are we concerned about the food? We're concerned that if we put the napkin on the table, the water will be matam of the food, and we're not concerned ma'ishna gabi yadayim dechashinan. And why we're not concerned if you put the napkin on the kesses, on the cushion, the liquid on the napkin will become tummy from the cushion, and then it'll be matama's hands. It seems to be that it's the same type of concern. So Beis Hillel says, well, we're saying that you put the napkin, we say you put it on the cushion, and we're not concerned that the cushion will be matama, the liquid on the napkin matama's hand. But we are concerned if you put it on the table, that the liquid on the napkin will be mitame, you'll have tome on the foods will become tome. Well, why are we concerned about the food and not about the hands? I feel nevertheless, even though it might be similar and they might be similar concerns, but it's more of a concern about the food than the hands because they know the time the chul minat Torah. Because minat Torah, there's no such requirement of washing hands. Minat Torah, food can become tummy. Now, it's true that in this scenario, there's no tumah deraisa, but generally speaking, there is tumah for l'oichle minat Torah. But there's no such thing, a concept as tumas yadayim minat Torah. Therefore, mutav sheyitmu yadayim, the less l'ikra minat deraisa, even though there is a chashash, like Beis Shammai says, by putting the napkin on the cushion, but rather have that chashash where the consequence would be only tumas yadayim, which does not have a makor in the Torah, and rather than have the oichlim, then that has a tuma minaraisa, and rather than that type of tuma. So the next machlokes in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai says that you sweep first before you do my machreinu. So they say first sweep the floor, sweep the table, and then clear it, and then do my machreinu. Why? Because if you do my machreinu first, maybe some of the water will spill on the remaining food over there and ruin it. So we're afraid about ruining the food. But they said, don't wash first because of this concern. Beis Hill says we're not concerned because if the waiter of the servant, the shamash, is a Talmud Chacham, he'll know noitel pirum. He takes the big crumbs, the big pieces, he'll remove from the table anyway. The sweeping is just for the small crumbs. We're not worried about that. The big pieces, if the waiter is a Talmud Chacham, he'll know and remove it prior to the Til Shilayim anyway. So the actual sweeping, we're not concerned about. So what's he going to leave? He'll know to take the big pieces. He'll just take the small crumbs. For the small crumbs, we're not concerned if they get wet, if the water falls on them. We're not concerned about that. Because he says crumbs, which are less than gazais, you can ruin them. You're not worried about ruining them, and you can clear them off. You can throw them away. So therefore, he holds you don't have to sweep first because the sweeping is only for small crumbs, and we're not concerned if they get wet. But by kamifkli, what's underlying this machlek is Beis Hillel savri also lishtamish b'shamash amaretz. Beis Hillel holds you're not allowed to use a waiter which is an amaretz, and therefore the waiter is going to be a Talmud Chacham. He's going to remove the big pieces. So we're not concerned with Beis Shammai's chashash. And therefore, you can wash my machrayim first. Beis Shammai savri mutu lishtamish b'shamash amaretz. Beis Shammai says, no, it is mut. You are allowed to use a shamash which is an amaretz. And therefore, we're concerned the waiter might be an amaretz. He might not remove the big pieces, and we're concerned for Ibad Oichlin. In the whole parak, all these machlek Beis Shammai Beis Hill, we hold like Beis Hill, except in this latter case, that the loch is like Beis Shammai, and who holds you are allowed to use a shamash which is an amaretz, and therefore you have to clear the table first. He learns the machlekes in reverse, the shitas in reverse, and we paskin like Beis Hillel because we do hold l'maisa that they both hold that we do hold that you're allowed to use a shamash which is an amaretz. Next machlekes Beis Shammai Nero Mozain Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Klebei Rava Chazil Rava the Barach and Besamim Reish. So he saw they made Havdalah and he made the bracha on Besamim before the Eish. Amalei Michte Beis Shammai Beis Hill Amor Loi Pligi. Why are you doing that? This doesn't seem to be machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hill. The Tanya Beis Shammai Yamim Ner Umazon Besamim v'Havdalah. Because we learned in the Mishnah that this Lan Beis Shammai says Ner first the Eish, then benching, then Besamim Havdalah. Ner is first. So Beis Hillel Ner also says Ner is first. Ubesamim Mazon v'Havdalah. But the machlekes between them is on the order of when benching is, but it's not which ner and besamim. They both agreed that the ner goes first. Ani Rava Basrei, he said Zuti Ramer. That's correct, but that's only the version of Ramer in the machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Nechlu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Ala Mazon Shubetchila. He said they don't argue on Mazon benching is first, but Al Havdalah Shiva Seif and Havdalah Mavdal is at the end. Alma Nechlu Ala Mor Vala Besamim. Beis Shammai Ala Mor Vala Besamim. Beis Shammai says first Eish and then Besamim. Ubeis Hillel Besamim Vala Mor. But Beis Hillel says, no, first Besamim, and then Eish. Now, I'm following the sheet of Beis Hillel according to this view of Rav Yehuda. And that's the halach, and that's how we paskin. Beis Shammai, there's a machlekes. How do you do? What's the proper nusach? Is it shabor moresh or bore moresh? Now the bracha of Eish, we're giving Shabbat Chaydo that Rabbi Shem created. It was created in the past. He created the fire. So it has to be a past tense. So Rava says, "Bibora kolim pligi the boramash." That's the past. Ki pligi beboire is boire appropriate. Beis Shammai savre boire do also lemiver. The Shammai says it's not appropriate because it's future tense, and the bracha should be in for the past tense. Beis Hillel savre boire nami the boramashma, but Beis Hillel says no. Boire also is mashma past tense. Masav Rav Yitzchak, what do you mean? It says Yitzchak or Ubare Chayshech. It says Boire, and clearly this is referring to the past. Rabbi Shem created the light and the darkness. Yitzchak Horim Uboire ruach, and it says boire, and it's clearly the past tense. Boire hashemayim v'noiteyem, he created. It says boire, it's the past tense, so that can't be the explanation. El amar Rav Yosef bebora uboire kolim v'loy pligi debora mash. It's true in both of them. Even boire, it's also mashma past tense. Ki pligi b'mor u'moire. The machlokes does not revolve around bora or boire. The machlokes revolves around more or moire. The Beis Shammai savachara nahari kibnor. When you have a flame, now even though there are, if you look carefully, it's multicolored, etc. There's different shades, there's different colors. There's the orange and there's the red, there's the blue, but it's really considered one flame. So therefore, it should be ma'or in the singular. Since there are different shades and colors, it's appropriate to reflect that and say ma'or in the plural. There's different colors, and therefore you should say in the plural ma'or.